Dear ladies and gentlemen, and as the British wartime leader Sir Winston Churchill used to say, dear young ladies and young gentlemen, dear leaders of tomorrow, hello, one young world. It's great to be here today to start a year of activity here in Zurich to promote the interests of young people in a better world. But it was here in Zurich that Winston Churchill foresaw a United States of Europe in his September 1946 speech to the young people of Zurich itself. That vision has been largely accomplished in Europe, but it's not widely known that Churchill was also an advocate of what he called world government. And I think that the theme of One Young World, the changes the world needs and how they can be accomplished, fits very properly into that context. So One Young World has a vision of how common values should underpin our daily lives and our daily politics. But I want to focus on two particular issues that are my responsibility as Vice President of the European Parliament: democracy and human rights. Now, I started in politics at the age of 25, the cut-off point for One Young World. And 9 years later, I was elected to the European Parliament, and I've been there since 1984. I've witnessed how change and prosperity can be brought about by the mere joint desire to do well, to do better, to do good. I've witnessed and played my part in the ending of a divided Europe into one which is whole and free. I set up, as a young politician, the European Union's Democracy and Human Rights Initiative, and it was set up to assist the transformation of the ex-Soviet bloc. And it now spends 140 million euros each year promoting democracy and human rights in a wider world in which these values are either absent in many countries or are under increasing attack from powerful autocracies. So with great interest, I read the vision for change over the next 10 years that is being launched today as the Zurich Declaration. Now, some of you may know the European Parliament has over the years increased its power and therefore also the power of Europe's citizens. And last December, the Treaty of Lisbon entered into force. It unequivocally frames the EU as a European Union of rights and values and significantly increases its capacity to project those values through what is in effect a European foreign ministry. The EU's external policies already reflect the 6 areas of impact of One Young World, and the further 10 goals One Young World has set for the decade to come pose a legitimate and timely challenge for us all. David, like you, I've long been concerned about climate change, and it was reflected in the video you showed about the corporate interests in this field and sustainability. Last December, I organised a hearing in the European Parliament in Brussels on food policy and climate change. Less meat equals less heat, about the impact of food production on our climate. And I was delighted to have there, not Bob Geldof, but Sir Paul McCartney, who campaigns for a meat-free Monday. Now, as a politician, I believe in leadership. So it's now more than 20 months since I stopped eating meat, in order to reduce my carbon footprint and, incidentally, my weight. However, today I want to talk to you about today I want to talk to the world leaders of tomorrow on the EU's founding principles of democracy and human rights, which are also its primary foreign policy goal. So I can only support your call on all political candidates and leaders to make clear their stance on human rights and to hold them accountable. Now, on democracy, Churchill said, democracy is the worst system of government, except all the others that have been tried. So I'm a very committed supporter of democracy, as indeed is the EU. And I think it's important that you've asked for standing positions for business leaders, such as those you've been showing this morning, to be created by the EU and the UN to allow business leaders some position in policy formation. And the United Nations has already established, I think it was under Kofi Annan, a global compact of this type for companies doing business in countries like China, I believe the EU should do likewise, to embrace the continent's business and commercial leadership in its values system. We need, for example, a European endowment for democracy and human rights, like the one in Washington, supported with public finance, but also with private charitable donations. Even today, the European Parliament is in Strasbourg debating how we should deal with products made under forced labor in China's Laogai, that's the prison camp system, where 7 million people are detained in camps, the majority held because of their religious convictions, according to the United Nations. And David, if I just break off for a second to address a point to Madam Mayor, and indeed the wider Swiss community. This week, somebody who I previously helped to get asylum in Europe, who's been living here in Switzerland happily, this week, I'm afraid, was taken to the airport and only managed to get back home after protesting through his lawyer. He is a policeman from the Uyghur part of China, which is the Muslim part, and he'd witnessed the murder by the Chinese regime of prisoners so that they can sell their body parts. And I appeal to the Swiss authorities to allow him to remain here as an important witness to this modern-day horror. But when we look at the European democracies and their place in the world, we see more than mere electoral democracies. Human rights are understood and applied as an interdependent whole, as are civil and political rights, as well as social, economic, and cultural rights. You see democracies where adults not only have a vote, but a free voice to demand deliverance of their needs and expectations. The EU is largely known as an economic union and as a trade bloc to the rest of the world, but it is also the world's largest aid donor. So if the goals of One Young World are to be fully met, it's important to take into account that democracy, human rights, security, governance, and sustainable development are intrinsically linked. Democratic principles and values are also key to sustain poverty alleviation, economic development, gender equality, and an end to corruption. Trade and economic development are important, and wealth, or our gross national product, are vital to all of us. But as Robert Kennedy, brother of President John F. Kennedy, said, "Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile." And in some ways, that statement anticipates the One Young World approach. And the same underpinning of values lies behind Europe's treaties, its institutions, and common history. And I hope that you agree that the EU can be a model for the world in which, for example, China, democratic and free, becomes the new Germany in a new democratic and free Asian community. But that is for your generation, as mine helped to shape today's happier, united Europe. As Europe's foreign ministers agreed last November, in a set of principles that will shape the EU's projection of values from now on, they said, human rights and democracy are inextricably linked. Only in a democracy can individuals fully realize their human rights. Only when human rights are respected can democracy flourish. I look forward to developing our shared ideals and wish One Young World in Zurich the success it deserves. Thank you all.